So welcome to yet another discussion on UIDAI. We try our best to inform and educate people, not that too many people are listening to us. I'm not going to talk about UIDAI at all. I'm going to just introduce our speakers and leave the floor to them. Dr. Anupam Saraph has held CXO and ministerial level positions and has served as an independent director on the boards of public and private companies and NGOs. As a professor of systems and governance and decision sciences, environmental systems and business, he mentors students and teaches information systems as well as environmental systems. He's actively engaged in civil society in environmental, resource and nature conservation initiatives. He has authored draft legislation for river and natural resource conservation, right to good governance, and has contributed to election and democratic reforms. In fact, he has a lot to say about EVMs, but that's a separate topic. He advises the World Economic Forum through its Global Agenda Council for Complex Systems and the Club of Rome, Indian National Association as a founder life member. Dr. Saraph is a PhD in designing sustainable systems. He also is an MSc in molecular biology and a BSc in zoology. Of course, he's also a trustee of Moneylife Foundation. Dr. Usha Ramanathan works on the jurisprudence of law, poverty, and rights. She did her doctoral studies from the Delhi University. She writes and speaks on issues that include the nature of law, the Bhopal gas disaster, mass displacement, eminent domains, civil liberties, including the death penalty, beggary, criminal law, custodial institutions, the environment, and judicial processes. She's been tracking and engaging with the UIDAI project and has written and debated extensively on it. You must have seen her on television several times. She was a member of the expert group on privacy set up by the Planning Commission of India, which gave its report in October 2012. She was also a member of the committee set up by the Department of Biotechnology to review the draft human DNA profiling bill in 2012. She was a member of the committee set up by the Prime Minister's office to study socio-economic status of tribal communities, which gave its report to the government in 2013 and 14. So with this, I leave the stage to you.
Very good evening, and great pleasure to be with you today. So I think, how many of you have an Aadhaar? How many of you don't have an Aadhaar? Okay, so...
It's an echo chamber.
Okay, so before I start talking about Aadhaar, I thought I'll say a few words about, the social security number. I think all of us are often told that the United States is a great example of how things work. And the social security number has been around for quite some time. I don't know how many people actually know that in 2013, 12.6 million victims of identity fraud existed in the United States, which is something like one identity fraud in 3 seconds. Also, the estimates of the US Treasury Inspector said that in 2017, this year, they expect something like 26 billion of false claims made to the IRS on count of identity fraud. So the raging debate in the United States for some time now has been that why should we continue with the social security number? It's important to note this, that not just in the United States, but also in the United Kingdom, in 2009, at the very time that we were busy trying to get the UIDAI started, the Unique Identification Authority of India started, the United Kingdom was busy trying to close down its national ID program. So David Cameron, before he became the Prime Minister, actually promised to the people of United Kingdom that if I become Prime Minister, one of the first things that I will do is actually scrap the national ID program. The people of the United Kingdom had actually paid for their national ID. And despite the fact that people had paid to get an ID card, this was a promise which was made, and when he became the Prime Minister, he actually made sure that Theresa May who was in charge of scrapping it and who's the Prime Minister of UK now, actually went and shredded the hard disks on which the national ID data was stored. And they made it illegal to use the national ID and its database in the United Kingdom. Why did he do that? So there are three reasons why that I will mention, why he said he is going to scrap this. So the first thing he said is that whenever he asked for the function of a national ID, he was given different reasons. So there was no single function which was really attributed as a need for the national ID. First, he was told that this is required because people go across borders. Then he was told it is important because it will ensure that we can track terrorists. Then he was told it's required for some welfare activities. So he said that there is no clarity of purpose. Second thing he said is there's a lot of functional creep, which means that you tend to link this ID to almost everything that every department is doing.
Because it exists.
Because it exists. Because it's a national ID, because it's a single ID. So when you link it to everything, then what happens is it's a single point of failure for your rights. So if somebody loses his national ID, then he loses his right to existence in the country completely. And he says that's completely unfair. That's a violation of human rights. So you cannot have a single point of failure. If you lose one of your IDs in the country, you might have some function which comes to a halt for a few months, but you will be able to restore it and you can continue to survive. So when you have multiple IDs, you have resilience in the system. When you have a single ID, that resilience is destroyed for the citizen. And it's important to create that resilience. So that was his second reason. And the third reason he said is that it's important that the citizen should be somebody who is above the state. It cannot be that the state is above the citizen. The relationship between the state and the citizen is radically altered when you have an ID which requires you to prove that you are part of this country. So it's important that the state actually be one which delivers to you your welfare and your rights without requiring you to prove that you are part of this country. So these were the three key reasons why he actually decided to scrap the UID, the national ID in the United Kingdom. If you look at 2009, when we started our ID program, there was a strategy document produced by the UIDAI. And in this strategy document, there were three key reasons which were talked about for why we need to actually have an Aadhaar program or a UID. At that point of time, it was called as unique identification database. So the first thing that was talked about was that Indians don't have an identity document. And without this identity document that we create, Indians don't have an identity to be able to exercise and access their rights. So therefore, we need to give them an identity. This was one of the first statements that they made. Now it's interesting to look at the data which has come from RTI from UIDAI itself about the people who have got an Aadhaar card. So according to the UIDAI itself, 99.9% people who got an Aadhaar card had at least two other IDs. So which means it was not required at all. Nobody except 0.01% of the entire population of India did not have an ID by their statistics. It's not my statistics, it's their statistics. So if you look at what this has done when you suddenly say that you now have created a new ID, what does this do to these people? Does this actually help those who got the ID or those who did not, or those who have resisted and not got the ID? I think in this room we had at least 20% plus people who have still not got an ID. According to the government of India, it's almost 99% of Indians who have got an ID. Adults. More than 1.2 billion people, right, as of now? Something like that.
Children also are supposed to get it.
A lot of children. No, I'm saying 99% of the adults have got it. They're getting the children also.
Interestingly, they don't give a split between how many residents and how many citizens have got an ID. It's anybody's guess. Because it's a resident card. It's not a citizen card. It's a card which is, or a number which is given to any resident who applies. They also don't explain what happens when somebody ceases to be a resident of India.
Or how do you prove residence without
Or how
the ID?
how do you prove residence? That also is not explained. So notwithstanding all of that, if you ask the question that now that we have actually given this, what does this do? How does this help anybody to access any of our rights any better or worse than we could before? So they have done the following. They have created two classes of people. One is a class of people who have the Aadhaar, and the second is who don't have the Aadhaar. And wherever possible, they have tried to see how can we change some processes which will become more cumbersome for those without an Aadhaar, so that we can actually force them to get an Aadhaar. So an instance is the new passport procedures, where they say that if you give your Aadhaar, you will get your passport without needing a police verification. Which, incidentally, yes.
Which is not true.
Which is...
I just got my passport this morning and I refused to go for the police verification last year because I said, I've given my Aadhaar, why do I need to go for the verification? They said, you have to, unless you complete your verification, we will not dispatch. I took it lightly, like nothing they will do, they have to give it because it's a law saying they did not. And I had to close the file last year, reopen the file, pay another 1,500, and this morning I got my passport.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. So,
Sympathy also, she gave the Aadhaar and still had to go through this.
so now what is very clear is that Aadhaar has not become an enabler, but it has become yet another layer of red tape. So you have to have the Aadhaar to access your rights and your services and your entitlements, and that does not guarantee you that you will get it in any case. So it's become yet another layer. So when Nandan Nilekani talks of all these layers, and I have lost track of all the layers he talks about, there is a layer of bureaucracy that he has put on top of everything that we had in this country. Second thing that it has done, which is probably more important in today's talk's context, because I really want to try and focus on how Aadhaar is an enabler of crime. And if you look at it, the first thing that it has actually enabled by getting this huge 1.1 billion demographic and biometric record database. I call it as demographic and biometric database because I don't believe that there is a one-to-one correspondence between the records and people of India. What do I mean by that? I mean it's just what is an Aadhaar number? It's a random number which has been assigned to data which was submitted by private parties to the UIDAI. This data was neither verified by anybody nor was it audited by anybody. So nobody can actually testify and say that every record there corresponds to a real person in India or anywhere in the world. Nobody can testify that this is actually the address where this person lives. Because it's never been verified, it's never been audited. We have simply taken their word for it. In fact, if you comb through every document of the UIDAI, nowhere will you find the assertion that we are certifying the proof of identity, proof of address, or proof of existence. If you look at your Aadhaar card, you will not find the signature of a single officer of the UIDAI certifying that they actually identified anybody. If you look at your driver's license, you look at your passport, you look at your, ration card, you will actually find the seal and signature of a government official who takes responsibility and liability for the process that has been followed in issuing that document. In the case of the Aadhaar, there is no government officer, and under RTI, the UIDAI has admitted that there is no government officer who takes liability and responsibility of saying that you are who you are. So it is a myth that it is an identification document or it is a proof of address. It is neither. Okay, it is neither, because on RTI they have confessed that there is no government officer who actually testifies this. So now, if you have this huge database, how was this created? This was created by actually having private parties enroll people. The strategy document starts off by saying that we will actually have registrars. UIDAI is not going to collect the information. We are going to go to state governments who may in turn appoint certain registrars, which will be ministries and government departments and maybe some public sector banks, who can then in turn subcontract to enrollment agencies. The registrars shall maintain a flexibility of what they will collect and how they will retain the information. So they have full permission to retain all the data that they collect. They have full permission to use the data in any which way they want, including the biometric. So you can go back to the strategy document and verify what I'm saying. This is not my made-up story. This is something which is in the strategy document of the UIDAI. It says that the registrar has the right to keep the biometric. In fact, they can even issue their own cards on which they can have the biometric and they can do local authentication. So which means they don't need to actually query the UIDAI database. They can simply compare your biometric with whatever they may store locally or in their card, on the cards which they may issue to you. So what does this mean? This in turn gets echoed onto the enrollment agency. So the enrollment agency is free to do exactly the same thing. Collect that data and put it on their hard disks and store it. So all of these enrollment agencies are in effect in possession of all the demographic data and the biometric data that they collected from those who enrolled. So even before this data went into their data center or Fort Knox, where the gold has to be stored, it was stolen. It's already gone. It's already, with all those enrollment agencies and registrars, and they can use it whatever way they want. Whether they want to create an individual who is drawing subsidy, whether they want to create a bank account, or whether they want to actually display the beneficiaries of some scheme, they have the data which was collected during the time of enrollment. So nobody knows where and how it will be used. And nobody is in control of where and how it will be used, because it is not data sitting in the data center of the UIDAI. I think this is a very key point, which, yes, Vikram.
Please explain how then the UIDAI has asked for an investigation into the Axis Bank case.
Yes. So I will come to that. So now what does this actually imply? Commonly, the UIDAI likes to say that, look, this is a very different ID, We actually took your biometrics. So with your biometrics, we can identify you. And, we know you are there. So right from the beginning, many of us have been saying that, that's the most dangerous thing to use as a password or as a way to authenticate a person. And why is that? Anything that can be stored and cannot be altered or cannot be changed by you in case it is stolen or lost is a bad thing to use as a password. What do I mean by that? If I can store your biometric and in your absence I can use it, so which means I've stolen it, and you can't go and alter your biometric, then once it's compromised for life. Unlike a password which you store in your head, where suppose I steal your password, you will go and change the password and you will be, quite normal. Your life will go back to what it was before I stole your password. If I steal your biometric, your life cannot go back to normal. Now, why is this of concern? Because your biometric can be used for a bank transaction, it can be used for a property transaction, it can be used for marrying of people together, it can be used for anything that happens, So because they are saying we are doing biometric authentication. So the UIDAI was denying this for a long time. About 3 weeks ago, there was a person called Samir Kochar who actually posted a video, and I'm going to show you the video of what is called as a biometric replay hack. So what does it mean? Somebody who actually captures a biometric and then in the absence of the person actually uses the biometric to authenticate a transaction. So I'll just show you the video.
Here to walk you all through the biometric verification process using mobile. So just to start with the process, you just need to click on Start Verification button. So here you will be taken to the page where you can see biometric. In order to proceed, you just click on Next button. So as you can see here, you will the device will ask you to connect the biometric device. So in my case, I have already connected to the device earlier in order to avoid discontinuation. So as I click OK, I'll be taken to the next screen where you can see capture button. If I click on capture button, the device gets active and I'm just putting my thumb. So this is how it has, my thumb impression has been captured. In order to verify the impression, like I'm just clicking on verify button and this is how the lead gets verified. Guys, this is another slide where the same lead can be verified. So if you click on Start Verification button, here you need to select the biometric. Here you can see as you just need to click on the Next button and the application will show you directly the finger impression of the Aadhaar number without having biometric device connected. So if I click on Verify, the lead gets verified. So guys, here we wanted to show you Aadhaar number can still be verified with store biometric finger impression without having Aadhaar card holder physically being present. Thanks.
Okay, so you all got it? The first set of slides she showed that the biometric was captured using a biometric reader. In the second set of slides, without the biometric reader, the stored biometric was submitted in order to verify the person who was not present.
What was it doing? Where was it doing?
So any verification process that requires this, whether you are getting your Jio SIM card or whether you are going to be, transferring property or withdrawing, or getting the midday meal for children.
Or your bonded labor being rehabilitated.
Or Narega, or anything where you require a biometric in order to verify a person, the person need not be present. You can submit the stored biometric. That is what was illustrated in this video. Okay, now many people said that, oh, this is a video, but where does it show the UIDAI involved? So it's important to note that what happened after this. This is a notice which is sent by the UIDAI to people who were involved in this hacking. Okay, so this is a legal notice which actually accepts that this was a stored biometric which was submitted. And I'm going to just highlight to you one paragraph, the use of stored biometrics. So without biometrics being, this transaction is not possible without biometrics being stored and without unauthorized use of such stored biometrics. So they admitted to the fact that such transactions can happen and are happening. Why? When did they admit? When somebody actually demonstrated just that this can happen. So they cannot actually even track that such a transaction has happened. But because they saw this video and they threatened that the person who put up the video that will file an FIR against you, and then they served this notice. And then they served 3 firms with a notice: Axis Bank, eMudra, and Suvidha. So these 3 companies are supposedly under investigation now for having used stored biometrics. Now, when you hear the word Axis Bank, that means financial transactions are involved. So you can actually do financial transactions without the presence of the person whose biometrics is there. So I'm not even going into the issue whether biometrics will uniquely identify a person. I'm simply saying, look at the crime that can be committed if somebody has a database of stored biometrics and stored Aadhaar numbers. I don't need those people to be present in order to do any transaction on their behalf, like claim their subsidies, claim their scholarship, to transfer their property, to withdraw money from their bank accounts, to do money laundering, to do anything. I don't need to have that person be present.
So, with respect to this storing of biometrics, I had met the CEO of UIDAI and I'd asked him this specific question. And the trope that I used to get every time, and even I think Nilikani says the same thing, that the technology has been built in such a way that it's just a handshake of yes or no. And you had said that you had illustrated through this video that that's not the case. I mean, every time I have asked this question, they have told me it's still a handshake of yes and no, we don't store it. Now that they have found out that, okay, fine, people have exposed that it's being stored, why are they still saying the same thing and issuing notices like these?
Yeah, so the important thing is that there are two parts to it. First is applications to actually query the database of UIDAI are developed by third parties. Okay, they will be developed by fintech companies across the world. And these fintech companies will use the programming interface provided by a body called iSpirit. I think Usha will tell us a little bit more about iSpirit and what iSpirit is. So this body has developed this programming interface.
India Stack.
Which is the India Stack, right. So you can develop an application that does anything, including store the biometric. And in fact, because as I told you, your data, your biometric was stored on the hard disk when you enrolled. You don't even have to develop an app which is going to store the biometric. You only have to write into the app the possibility of picking up the biometric from the hard disk and submitting it.
So you mean to say that they're not encrypting it when enrollment also, because...
It's very clear that it's not encrypted.
Okay.
Otherwise, they could have actually said that this is not possible. Earlier, their claim was that it is encrypted and it is not stored in the native form. But even if they did that, it's possible for somebody to know what is the encryption scheme and submit it in that encrypted form.
So can you explain how that can happen? If you don't mind, if it's not too much of a divergence.
No, I don't want to. We can take the technical thing offline, but to very simply say I want to point out the kind of crime that can happen. And that is happening and will happen without detection. Because how do you detect this crime? Who will complain? Who is the complainant? Who is the aggrieved party? When will the aggrieved party actually know that the crime happened? So you now suddenly have unleashed a crime, a set of undetectable crimes into the ecosystem, okay, which did not exist pre-Aadhaar. Pre-Aadhaar, this kind of crime was not possible. And undetectable crime was extremely difficult to do. Now this has become extremely easy to do. For techies, this is an extremely easy thing to do. So the second point that the strategy document actually made was that that we are going to do financial inclusion. We need to make sure that Indians who are deprived of access to banking need to be included and they come into the mainstream. This is against a backdrop of 94.7% of rural India not having even a branch of a bank. So when 94.7% of India doesn't have a branch of a bank, forget about literacy of those people in these villages, financial literacy about what is a bank, what is credit, what is debit, what is a savings account, what is a, how do I withdraw, what's a passbook, what record does it keep, how do I make sure my money is there, how is it not stolen. There is no way to, these people know about it because there's no branch, they have not been banking. And now you say that by giving them an Aadhaar number, suddenly they are going to be financially included. So what is the big leap that we are making? We are talking about going to a place where there's no branch of a bank and where there is no electricity, where mobile penetration is very low and where internet penetration is even lower. And we are saying that we'll give them a mobile and they will do banking on a mobile. Or we will send a business correspondent, which will be somebody who's hired by some banks under no regulatory framework, and he will go there and simply go with a mobile device and do banking for people in rural India.
Accept your money.
And accept their money and give them receipts on paper which fades away in few hours. And no passbook. And no record with any branch of any bank about their account. So this is called financial inclusion. Okay? So now, if you look at it, what is the kind of crime that can happen? I think the possibilities are endless, right? So when you see that after demonetization, the government started talking about using Aadhaar-enabled payment systems. And in fact, a little before, it had said that that's what we will use for DBT, direct benefit transfers, to your Aadhaar-linked bank accounts. What is the big thing about Aadhaar-linked bank accounts? Aadhaar-linked bank accounts are not under the RBI regulation. Aadhaar-based payment systems are not under the RBI regulation. They are actually run by a non-government private company called as the National Payments Corporation of India. Many people in government don't know it is a non-government company. I suppose even the CEO of the Niti Aayog doesn't seem to know that it's a non-government company, and instead of promoting NEFT, through which all of us have been doing electronic money transfers, and even the government has been transferring pension for people in remote areas, was not promoted during this entire period, and Aadhaar-based payment system was promoted. Aadhaar-based payment system actually wipes out the money trail. And if time permits, sometime later, I may come back and explain how the trail is wiped out. Right now, you'll just have to take my word for it, but I'm happy to clarify it in question and answers. The second instrument which was promoted is the Universal Payment Interface. The Universal Payment Interface is also developed, actually also promoted by the National Payments Corporation of India, and it has been developed by the iSpirit, by the same iSpirit that Usha will talk a little bit about. What's so interesting about the Universal Payment Interface? It allows you to create a virtual payment address. which means you don't have to expose your account number to somebody who has to pay you. When you do that, you actually hide the money transfer. So the passbook entry will not show where the money actually came from. If there is a transfer between two VPAs, you completely lose the money trail. So bankers call this as money laundering. So you are actually facilitating a way, and actually I've done this, I've talked about this many times, and some audiences didn't believe this. So I said, okay, who are the techies here who have bank accounts on mobile phones? Please do a transfer and verify for yourself. And every time they've come back and they've said, they've literally, their jaws have dropped, that they could find that there is no money trail. And interestingly, I can create a virtual payment address which is like Usha Ramanathan at ICICI. And she neither uses a mobile nor has an Aadhaar. And I can actually, the passbook entry will show this is a transfer between Usha Ramanathan and somebody. How scary can that be? This is the instrument that the government of India promoted after demonetization to go digital. Instead of talking about using your debit card or using the NEFT, which are both regulated by the RBI, we are talking about promoting something developed by a non-government company which should actually be delicensed. Because this is something which is an extremely dangerous instrument and can cause huge number of crimes to happen, which will make it a nightmare for cyber police. So interestingly, if you look at the Reserve Bank of India, it has always been resisting the linkage of Aadhaar with bank accounts and with the opening of bank accounts and the banking system. But after Aadhaar started allowing bank accounts to be opened solely with Aadhaar, so between 2009 and 2014, the number of accounts in the system shot up from 66 crore to 122 crore. So it more than doubled. Whereas earlier, before Aadhaar, these accounts used to grow annually at maybe about 1 or 2 crores a year. So they more than doubled. The deposits in India grew from 40 lakh crores to 80 lakh crores in the same period. So now, this is financial inclusion, right? People had so much money in unincluded parts of India that all the deposits in India actually doubled. Because this is what the government's story is. But you can obviously know that somebody has been depositing into some accounts, and just because these number of accounts increased, this money is now being hidden away from the system. The third thing that the government has been saying is that Aadhaar is required because we want to deduplicate the frauds and ghosts in Indian databases. So there are duplicate PAN cards, there are duplicate driver's licenses, ration cards, and there are a lot of ghost entries there. And therefore, we need to have this new ID. I think those of you who are familiar with IT will realize that there is no requirement to create a new ID, or those who are familiar with audits and who are familiar with looking through accounts will realize that we don't need to create a new ID in order to clean up a database. All that you need to do is you need to identify the suspects and go and verify them. And there are various methods that you have to actually narrow down and find out the 20%, 30%, or even 50% fake records that may exist in a database. There's no need to create a fresh new ID. So what is the danger of creating a fresh new ID? One of the biggest dangers of creating a fresh new ID is that you are now introducing new ghosts and new duplicates, which I started off with when I pointed out to you that this database has neither been verified nor audited. Actually, what the UIDAI did was it appointed as registrars those very people who they said are the people who have been having frauds and duplicates in their databases. So suddenly you are now creating an acceleration method for this. And why is this dangerous? Because we now create a channel to allow illegal immigrants and terrorists to infiltrate into the system. Spies to infiltrate into the system. It's a national security issue. We also allow dummy voters to be created in constituencies. We allow constituencies to be manipulated and be run by people who control these databases. So we suddenly have a huge national security issue which crops out of it. So when you look at these three things which they claimed they were going to do, and you can see that they have actually unleashed fresh crime by doing this. I almost come to the conclusion that they have, created a fraud machine or a fraud generation machine. Recently, somebody said that 80 crores have been given to the Indian Institute of Science to develop an AI technology to detect these financial frauds, because they realized after we wrote about it so much that this is absolutely true and we need to detect these crimes. So 80 crores were promptly sanctioned in order to detect these crimes through AI. So first you create a fraud engine and then you create a fraud detection engine instead of spending the money to prevent the fraud in the first place. When you know that this fraud can happen, you should actually get rid of the fraud generation engine. Instead of doing that, and instead of learning from what the US is facing and what the UK did, we are now actually going ahead and simply, accepting it. So I want you to listen to Usha, so I'm going to pause here, but just before pausing, I'm going to say two things about what we can do. So first is legal protests. I think the first thing that we need to do is wherever the wherever any government department or private company asks for an Aadhaar, it's important to serve them a notice. A few months ago, I wrote in the Moneylife a draft notice which can actually be copied and sent across to any government department as well as the UIDAI, telling them that this is a violation of the Supreme Court orders. I think that is something that needs to be used. Second is there need to be people who file short PILs on specific issues, like for example, if there is a linkage of the UID number to a specific thing like pensions, you might want to file a short PIL saying that this is a violation and this should be stopped and I don't want to link things with the UID. Third is that people need to actually file contempt petitions. So these are three things which relate to legal action. Then there is also a police and crime investigation or crime detection protests that we can do, and there I think firstly we need to have Aadhaar crime literacy amongst cyber police. I think currently that is completely lacking. There are only few pockets where cyber police actually know Aadhaar related crimes and they need to be educated about it. Second is we need to be marking the police in some of the contempt notices that we file so that the police become aware that here is a place where potentially crime is happening. And we need to be able to track and report Aadhaar related crimes. This is not happening right now. Okay, so with this, I think I'm going to pause here and hand over the floor to Usha so that we can get her perspective. Yes.
Thank you very much, Anupam. I think Usha is going to start with the Zafran video.
What you're going to see now is a short video clip in which Safran, which is one of the companies that has been involved as a biometric provider, what they have to say about the UID project and their involvement in it. And then we'll move on to the rest.
The service reputation of Morpho. I'm looking forward to their scientific advances.
Tout ce qui se passe en Inde va marquer l'histoire de l'identité pour les années futures.
Aadhaar is a Hindi word that means foundation, base. Aadhaar is a project managed by the Unique Identification Authority of India, who has a very simple goal: to give to each and every Indian resident its most fundamental right, the right to an acknowledged existence. For that, they are creating the most innovative identification platform based on biometrics.
Ce qui se passe en Inde va marquer l'histoire de l'identité pour les années futures, compte tenu de la dimension et de l'ambition de ce projet. C'est un projet qui vise d'atteindre 600 millions de personnes en 4 ans, 1,5 milliard à horizon plus lointain, et avec des droits divers et variés à gérer autour de ça.
Aadhaar is an inclusion project, so meaning that everybody should be part of it. You cannot let someone on the side. So the main challenge is to make sure that you enroll the biometrics of the people of India everywhere, anywhere in India. This project, in terms of technological challenge, has been compared to the space program, when they sent the first man on the moon.
C'est un projet unique au monde. Et ces enjeux, c'est évidemment dû à la taille de la population et aux ambitions du gouvernement indien de donner accès à des droits aux plus pauvres et aux plus démunis.
Proving your identity in India is a bit tricky because there is no ID card in India. For the middle and upper class, it's quite complicated. For the poorest people in India, it's barely impossible.
After completing your enrollment of all your family members in a center, they will issue such a card to you. This card will be helpful for you for all multiple benefits which are going to be given to all poorest poor families by the government.
The UIDAI selection process to select its biometric service provider and all the actors of the UIDAI ecosystem has been extremely stringent and based on one factor only: efficiency. Morpho has been selected amongst its competitors because it was the most efficient. For the Aadhaar project, Morpho has partnered with the most important system integrator in India, such as HCL Infosystem and Mahindra Satyam. Concretely, you have to capture the fingerprints, you have to capture the eyes, you have to send them to the central database, and you have to deduplicate them. In the Aadhaar project, Morpho is an enrollment agency. Morpho is a biometric device provider, and Morpho is a biometric service provider. We are at the 3 key technology steps of the project. Morpho is fully committed, fully involved in the UIDAI project.
People tell me we need a UID card, so I tell to all people you can go in a center and make this card. This is very, very good and very nice for life and for identity.
If I want to make a passport, then I will show this ration card to them. Then they will give me passport also. So I'm very happy, and I want that India should be much advanced.
The UID project is generating a complete ecosystem for biometry in which our sensors are well positioned. So we have already some sensors for enrollment, and sensors we are assembling here, small fingerprint sensors, will be used for the authentication-based Aadhaar system. Potential number of people using the system is the total population, so the field is really big.
Nous avons une position très forte au niveau international dans le domaine de l'identité biométrique, et d'être absent du projet indien, c'était tout simplement inconcevable. Nous voulions être présents pour notre image, mais également parce que ce projet va amener un progrès considérable dans la dimension et la gestion de l'identité compte tenu de ses ambitions.
The US, Brazil, most of African countries, South American countries, European countries have done official visits to check the progress of the Aadhaar project. The UIDAI project is creating an historical precedent. UIDAI is making history, and Morpho is part of it.
Thank you. Just a brief explanation of what this was and why we were interested in showing this. India doesn't have any biometric provider of our own. We've got these. We've got Saffron, Morpho, we've got L1 Identity Solutions. Accenture at one time was part of the project. And these are companies that are very closely linked with various kinds of institutions. This was noticed a long time ago, and I'll tell you what happened when we raised questions about this. Now, these L1 Identity Solutions, for instance, was an American company, and it has very close links with, all these biometric providers are people who have close links with the defense establishment and with the intelligence communities of their countries. And we know that with the kind of executive arrangements in the US for the longest time, with Edward Snowden told us, if we didn't know it before, that all information has to be given by all these companies whenever required by the NSA and in certain cases by the Homeland Security. If you look at L1 Identity Solutions, which is the other company involved in a thing like this, they were an American company very closely linked with the CIA. You've had ex-CIA directors being directors of on L1 Identity. It's got a revolving door policy where people come in from the intelligence community and go out of it. So it's very closely linked with the US intelligence establishment. That L1 Identity Solution, a large part of it was bought over by Saffron, which also has Morpho. Morpho is also part of the UID project. So you have Saffron Morpho, which is part of the UIDAI project. You have L1 Identity Solutions, which is part of this project. And Saffron is 30-odd% of the holding of Saffron is with the French government. So these are all companies that have a certain nationality and a relationship with their intelligence communities. So when we are handing over data of this kind to them, we are not just using a company. It is not just a company. It's not just something that is providing a service. It has a certain relationship with their own state and with their own intelligence communities. And so at one time, and it's only by way of introduction because we showed this first, but at one time there was an RTI that was filed with the government, with the UIDAI, saying that how come you're handing over all this data, to how come you're bringing in L1 Identity Solutions was on the first proof of concept study. They've been there from the beginning too. So the question was, how is it that you're allowing these companies? Why are you giving all our data to these companies? And the answer that was given to these foreign companies, and they said that we had no means of knowing that they were foreign. This is thank you. That's what anybody would have thought would be the answer, that we would laugh loud at it. But this was a serious response. And why? Because the way the pro forma is made, they only have to say, do they have a registered office in India? And they have a registered office in India, so it's fine. They didn't think of asking. So it's that bizarre. And that's the kind of company to whom we are giving this. It's also important that Colonel Matthew, for instance, has been telling us that the contract that has been entered into with these companies, it's not just a service contract. It allows them to keep that database up to 7 years. The contract is only for a period of 2 years, but it allows them to keep it for a period of 7 years. And the only way I can explain that is that the data retention policy in the government is generally for 7 years. So they've said, as long as we can retain it, you retain it. And then they have this, they say you can add anything you want to it, you can use it in multiple ways. So data that is being given as being part of an identity system, the contract allows them to do various things with it. And they don't seem to have any problem with it at all. In fact, getting hold of those contracts was so difficult. Now, after the law has come in the regulations, they've put in one clause which says confidentiality. So if there is any contract, if there is anything that's going on with the company, that will come within the confidentiality clause, and they want to override the RTI with these confidentiality clauses so that we will never know where our information is going and who's doing what with what. So there is, it's not just that the project is not a good project, and I think Anupam has been talking about it, we've been saying this for many years for multiple reasons, but it's also that it's being done in a way which is untrustworthy. It's not possible to trust people who are going to tell us lies, people who are going to hide things from us. It's really difficult to put our faith in people like this, and that's what we are being asked to do. I actually, this time when I came, the last time we had a good bit of discussion on a number of these things. And when I said this time that I was coming, there were a series of people, I mean, a few people who said that it would help if I were to place their point of view before anybody who's willing to listen. And that includes some of the petitioners. Actually, it was interesting because just before I came, before I came to Bombay, I saw an interview with, in ET Now or whatever, with Nandan Nilekani. And he makes certain very serious allegations. And those allegations, of course, are directed at us. So since we know ourselves, it's not worrying us too much. But that in the pushing down of a public project, there is a need to make these kind of scurrilous allegations about people. That I think is serious business. So, for instance, the idea that these are just Khan market liberals who are speaking, who have a problem with this, that we are all in an echo chamber and that nobody really cares about it. After all, 1 billion people have got onto this database. I think most of us here know why those who got onto the database got onto it, and at what point in time they got onto it, and what we think about it. One of the central themes of this whole project has been coercion. So I don't think we can run away from that. But I just felt, therefore, that first I should tell you who these people are who are asking that we need, that I tell you what their point of view is, because these are also people who are petitioners before the court. So Aruna Roy and Nikhil Dey, who are part of the MKSS, and unlike Mr. Nilekani's, quite contrary to what he thinks they are doing all their time, they live in a village in Rajasthan and they work in Devdungri. And I'll just tell you a little bit in a bit about what has been happening in Devdungri and what they have found. And they are petitioners before the court, and they have been, they've been saying from the beginning that there are 3 things that you said, that this project would do. One, it would deal with corruption. The second, that it would produce efficiency. And the third, that it would be inclusive. They say what they have seen in the field is that, in fact, it makes it very difficult to attack corruption, because the corruption is coming in a form where technology is helping people hide corruption. So, for instance, they found that where fingerprints don't work, and I should just tell you one figure that they've been telling us about, that 30% of the households in Rajasthan, now in Rajasthan they've said that you have to use your biometric to get PDS rations. So they said they found that, and this is a government figure, this is not their figure, that 30% of the households in Rajasthan have not been able to lift their rations because their biometrics do not work. So they have had to create at every stage, and this is the latest. This is after they started with just 12% working. They worked and worked and worked and worked on it, and finally they've said 30%. And then they say, oh, well, it may just be 10%, so it's really quite okay. But it is not 10%, it's actually 30%. And when we say, and they were very, they kind of emphasized this. They said this doesn't mean that biometrics is not working for 30% of the households. It means that in 70% of the households, there is at least 1 or 2 persons whose biometrics work. So there are many households where they have to call back a person. For instance, in one of the households that we visited, the grandchild of that house, only her, she's in college and only her biometrics work. Every month she comes back from her hostel because that's the only way they can collect their rations. Nobody else, none of the other biometrics work. So there is, and we'll go on to this of what kind of evidence is emerging in the field, and why is it that this evidence seems to be so irrelevant, in all this, on these decisions that are being made. So because 30% of them don't have their fingerprints working, for a while now they have said, the government has said that you can, after the 22nd, till when you will only get it on fingerprints, after that they can come in and they can collect the rations by, getting into the register system again. We visited a person, and she's been much written about too, who is 90 years old, who can't get up. When we went to visit her, she had to come to open the door, and it was the scariest thing to watch her trying to get up from that bed and come and open the door. She came out, when she opened the door and she sat down, we found that she hadn't received her rations in 8 months. She hadn't received her pension in over 8 months, because in the pension system, she's been declared dead. She was alive. I mean, we saw her. She was not a ghost. She was not a duplicate. She was alive. And she wasn't able to, she had actually got into a taxi, taken help from a neighbor, got into a taxi and, the fatfati and gone and tried to get herself enrolled on the UID, found that there were problems. She's 90, her fingerprints don't work. So if you can't get onto the system, then you're completely counted out. So they were saying that corruption has increased because the ration shop fellow finds it is possible for him to just siphon that off, because most people don't know that you can come and collect your rations later. There are people who cannot collect their rations, like this old 90-year-old could not go to collect her rations. So it gets siphoned off, and the whole thing is technology based, so you can't question it anymore. And there is nowhere for people to go because it is now cashless, paperless, presenceless. The presenceless has already begun, where no administrator gets into the field. You're having a game-changing project that's being implemented, and you don't find any administrator on the ground. So they're saying this corruption is a complete bogey. It doesn't work at all. The only way they had managed to bring down corruption in the PDS system was getting local communities involved, where they have an interest in making sure that the PDS system works, and it's through local controls that they were able to control the PDS retailers. And as for efficiency, I need hardly tell you that stands explained even in this. And inclusion, the extent of exclusion that is happening through this process is really not funny. And there are so many ways. So you find, for instance, one gentleman, when Arjun Singh comes and says that my son needs to get a caste certificate, he can't get a caste certificate because he needs to have a UID to get a caste certificate. So the child goes to enroll, and the child is told that no, you're a duplicate, so you can't get it. Now he says, I have never enrolled my son before. We do not have an Aadhaar number. And if we don't have this, I can't get a caste certificate. If I can't get a caste certificate, I can't get this child admitted into a school. And bright kid, he really wants the child to go to the model school and to do whatever. Can't do it out. There is a teacher, there's a lecturer in Ambedkar University in Delhi. And we're having this conversation, and he says, my child, I've got admission in a school, but the school says that I have to give the UID number, otherwise they can't put the child onto their register. So initially he said, I didn't want to do it because I didn't want to make the decision for my child. I said, let the child become 18 and make up her own mind about whether she wants to be on such a database or not. But then I realized that I lose admission if I do this. So I go and I try to get the child enrolled. Enrollment doesn't work. Then they say, come back in 2-3 days. He goes back, they say, no, it's not capturing anything, so I can't enroll you. Because for the enroller, they only get paid for every successful enrollment. And the system doesn't accept it unless there is basic amount of data that gets onto that database. So then the school refuses to register the child without this. So he's told the enroller, give me a receipt or a certificate, some kind of a thing saying that it is not working. After all, you are seeing it. Tell me it's not working. He says, I don't have any form, I don't have any authority to give you such a letter. I can't enroll you, that's all, you go and do what you will. So he's sitting there wondering how his child is going to get on into the school. Now these are anecdotes of what is happening, but we are seeing systemic problems in many of these places. So that's one kind of issue that's come up. Now the question that they were asking is, what is the value of evidence? In all of what we've been saying, what is the value of evidence? So the first part, I'll just tell you what they asked me to say, then I'll talk a little bit about iSpert and India Stack, and then we can go in for a discussion. The first thing is that, when I say untrustworthy, there is a reason for saying untrustworthy. Now you have the LPG, they say we have savings, which are some 22,000 crores, 15,000 crores, 14,000 crores. We have savings because of attaching Aadhaar to LPG. And then the CAG does an audit of it and says, that's not true at all. At best, it may be 1,700 crores. It is nowhere near 14,000 crores or 22,000 crores. If there was a saving that happened, but that was because of international prices, and it had nothing to do with Aadhaar. But you can pass everything off as being part of this. Now we find in PDS, the Prime Minister comes out with some huge figure, it's some billions that they say they've saved. Let me tell you how these savings, part of how these savings are get reflected. In Delhi, you have people go in for the PDS. Now you have to have your UID number. First of all, people drop off the system. So we found families who are not there at all on the system because they have not got enrolled, or they did not get enrolled in time. So they are out of the PDS. Then you have people who've got onto the PDS, but in a family of say 5, 3 of them get enrolled and get the number. The other 2 or 1 get enrolled, but they don't get the number. They don't get, they don't get back the thing. So there's maybe 3 or 4 out of 5 who are on the ration database. Then when they go to the ration shop, there are 3 columns which are supposed to be there. The first column is people who authenticated, who put their fingerprint, it worked, and they are then seen as having it worked, and they picked up the rations and went. Then the second column is where you put the fingerprint, it doesn't work, and therefore you don't get your rations. And the third column is people who don't come at all, who don't come to the shop, which means, that either they don't exist or they did not need it and they were unnecessarily on that database and have got frightened off by this, that there is an UID number which is now tracking them, and therefore never came. So when people working in Delhi in the field, in the right to food area, when they went to look for what, where were all these people? Because they said 50 or close to 50% of the people were treated as bogus and ghosts. Now that seemed like a huge number. Whatever we say, 50% disappearing from a ration list is like really big. So when they went to check what it was, they found that of the 3 columns, the middle column which says fingerprint given but did not work is empty, it's blank. So according to the administration, fingerprints work perfectly, 100% of the time they work. So then they picked up that list and went to those houses. This is activists doing it. No administrator bothered to do it. Why? Because they need to cut down on subsidy. That's their job. That's the task given to them. Cut it down so that we can show that there is a saving, and cut it down so that over a period of time, plainly the intention is that you should cut out these services altogether. But we'll come to that in a bit. So then they found that these people had actually gone, presented themselves, put their fingerprint. It didn't work, so they came back. Now, when they went back to the administration with it, initially the administrator said, no, this is not true at all. They never came, they don't exist, and whoever came, you can see that it's 100% the fingerprint works. Then when the software fellow was called in, he said, no, yeah, it's true that it does in fact either go into authenticated or it goes into never appeared, never came to the shop. So there are ways in which this technology and these kind of systems are deliberately being put in place so that they destroy the system, and that's what they are finding most distressing. It's plain by now, from the word go, from 2009 on, we've been seeing that their interest is in shutting down PDS, shut down NREGA, shut down what are all these other, shut down, now they're saying shut down the midday meal scheme. So there are multiple things like this that they want to shut down. I know that for many of us this is not an immediate concern because we don't really see that level of poverty. And honestly, I mean, urban poverty is bad enough if you get out and you see it in the slum areas. But when you go to rural poverty today, just to give you one statistic, in Devdungri, which is where they're working, Shankarji said that there is just one person left in that village who's on a government pension. People used to work in the government and they would be on a government pension. That people on the government pension kept the economy of that village going because that's the only certain money coming in. He said that's the last person and she's kind of growing older. He said when she disappears, there will be no government pensions here, which means that there are no secure monies coming into this place at all. They depend upon these systems because the way the system has got constructed, it's excluding all these people. It's not, and these are not lazy people at all. If you go there, I'm tired of people telling me that the poor are lazy, that's why they don't get any. If we have any idea about what laziness is and how the poor live, survival is a very, very hard task. And so to think that they're lazy and therefore they have to be punished for their laziness is as ignorant as it can get. So there is a real problem with this kind of approach. There's a lot of evidence that's coming out now. Last year, 2014-15, there was a study, in AP. Everyone tells us that Andhra Pradesh is the best example of how all these technologies work. So we said, okay, let's check with what's been happening in AP. And you find that in the month of May, suddenly 22% of those who collect rations have not collected rations in the month of May. The 22% is like over 1/5 of the people who would normally come and collect rations. It's a very unusual number. It's extraordinary. So they did a rapid survey with their social audit team. The report is out. It's public. And that report tells us that a large percentage of these, they found that it was because of Aadhaar, their biometrics did not match. Fingerprints not working is one major chunk of why people were not able to pick up their rations. Another interesting chunk that came up was Aadhaar mismatch, which means the data on the PDS and the data on the UID system don't match, and therefore you don't get your rations. So And then these are treated. Fortunately, in Andhra, they have a social audit team. So they went out, they looked, they came back with a report, and then they tried to remedy, to rectify some of this. But everywhere else, this is being treated as a saving. This is the saving that the government is talking about. So the evidence is saying something, and it's being deliberately misinterpreted as something else. And one of the recent studies that has come out is in the 3 union territories, they did pilot studies for cash transfer for PDS. And they found that it failed miserably. And this is not being done by, people like me who in any case are like, for some time now have been looking at the system and saying, can it really work? Why is it that they are pushing for this? This was done by a set of people who do random sampling and random testing. And when they did it, they found that in a number of cases, and it's reported, so you'll find it in the Business Standard, where they say that a number of people, it did not, they got paid more than they should have got paid. Number of them got paid less than they should have got paid. Some of them never got any money at all. Some of them got it so delayed that they were not able to go back and pay for it. So the system is, every kind of problem exists. I will confess that I honestly thought in the beginning that there will be problems. I did not think that there would be no problems. But I thought that the kind of problems that would exist would be repeated. The same problem would be repeated multiple times. Now, what we are finding, I found that in Dev Dungri, and I think I might have spoken about that here last time, where, you meet 9 people, and there are at least 6 to 7 kinds of problems in the system. Now you find that, you can pay more, you can pay less, you may not pay at all, you may delay and pay. So every which way, every kind of problem, and these, we are told, are teething trouble. Now, how long are we going to wait for teething trouble? If your fingerprints don't match, that's not teething trouble. There's something much more. Or you're going to wait for this technology to become so good that it can anticipate and come to you and get your body temperature or I don't know what. But till then, the poor are going to do without their food. Now, evidence that this is a problem has come in a slightly obtuse kind of way after this demonetization happened. When demonetization happened, some of us anticipated that it would lead to one of the big pushes would be to get into the cashless economy. And I just want to pause here to say why I think all this is happening. See, it's plain that the Prime Minister is very keen on having digital India. And if we look at all his pronouncements, I mean, I know I have a problem with anybody appropriating Gandhiji. I also have a problem with anybody appropriating Martin Luther King Jr. It's not fair. I think we should find our own language in which we say it. We cannot have a dream. We have to find something else. So in this dream of sorry, it's such a beautiful speech, huh? So, but in this dream, it is of India emerging as a digital superpower. And this is a dream that's being fed by people like, who are building up India Stack, people who are in iceberg, and we'll come back to that, saying that, this is the moment, because we are shifting into the technology age, and we have to capture this moment, then you can be the technology, you'll be the digital emperor of the world. Now, these are fine as ambitions. I have no problem with anyone having any kind of ambition. But when these are unreal ambitions, and in one sense, thank God they are unreal, but it's affecting people's lives on the ground today. So if you look at all these notifications, all these people have been really upset by the notifications. I don't know if you've seen them. There are about between 13 to 20 notifications that have come already. And if we just talk about a few of those, and we can actually talk about each of them, but if we just talk about some of these, one of the notifications says that Bhopal gas victims, who since 33 years have been having a struggle trying to get basic medical assistance, getting basic criminal case being prosecuted against these people who committed that offense then, whose compensation has been a pittance, where the Madhya Pradesh government has been talking on and off about shutting down the rehabilitation department because they feel they've done enough. In a place like that, they issue a notification saying that all victims of the Bhopal gas disaster have to come in and give their UID number if they are to continue getting any rehabilitation assistance. What government has the right to do this? You have people, this is a country where we have, where we know that anemia and malnourishment among children and people having stunted growth, it's not 3% of the population and 4% of the population, it's 50% of children. And we are talking here about not giving them their food unless they give their UID number. They're talking about women who are rescued from prostitution, being brought in for rehabilitation after they are rescued, and they have to have the UID number attached to their name before they are entitled to rehabilitation. We were discussing this before, the first principle in this kind of rehabilitation is anonymity. And you want, they're not even thinking. So if you read all these bonded laborers, it's in this context that Bezawada Wilson said, please say this too. Bezawada Wilson was one of the first. He works with the manual scavenging community, and he belongs to the community himself. And he was one of the first to sign a letter to the government and to the UIDAI saying in 2010 September, saying do not carry on with this project before providing basic protections and before having a feasibility report, which we too can have a look at. When you ask him, why does this project bother you so much, he says, they call it an identity project. I want my identity to be buried deep. I do not want to go back to this thing of being a manual scavenger. We are all trying to escape that identity. And you want to put that number in every database. You want, if I'm going to be, the government has not been following the law. It's not helped me get out of this practice of manual scavenging. In fact, through Swachh Bharat, you're reintroducing this idea of manual scavenging. And now you tell me I have to put my number on it so that it can be tracked and kept for generations. What on earth is this about? So there's a lot of anger that there is no understanding of what identity is and what is it about people that they want to destroy that identity which they have and move on in life. So that's something that's, that they were very keen should be said. And if we want to understand this idea of biometrics and why it's being used somewhere, it's being used in PDS, they're asking for it for NREGA, they want it for pension. And in fact, I should just pause here and say that Major General Jatar had written that now in the defense services, they're saying you're not going to get your pension from June. This is the same government that says we must all stand up and salute our soldiers, and you threaten them that you will not give them their pension unless they have a UID number attached to it. What is the logic? What kind of government will ask for a thing like this? And who is it who's teaching the government to ask this? Because I'm not sure at all. We know that with the Congress government, till the end, they didn't know if it was a card or a number. They had cabinet meetings. The cabinet had cleared all of this, and they were saying, but what is this number in 2014? 13, 14, they were sitting there and having these discussions. Is it a number or a card? If it's number, isn't it too difficult? I'm not even able to operate my mobile phone. All this is reported, by the way. This is not just, in the air. They had no idea what they were saying yes to. So I'm not sure at all that this government understands either, because we know, for instance, that the Niti Aayog chairperson, CEO as he's called, after demonetization said that we will have, within 6 months, everybody will be only transacting digitally. I mean, does he even know this country? What are they talking? And this is an IAS officer who should know the country.
Systems are crashed. You make a transaction, it says, please come back later.
So in the Vattel committee report, which is on digital transactions, there they say, we don't want to use biometrics. Those who want to do digital transactions, fintech companies do not want to use biometrics. Why? Because there are connectivity problems, because there are problems with the quality of the machine, on which you do these transactions. They do not talk about biometrics not working. So they stop with this and say, so allow us not to have this, but to have some other two-factor authentication. Which is why, and this is not something new, this is a plan that happened from before, and you have this JAM, which I think is a very potent kind of thing that you have to have. So every person has to have a mobile phone, has to have a bank account number, and has to have an Aadhaar number. If you don't have these three, you're excluded from the economy. Now, this kind of, we've got, for instance, complaints, and it's also now got reported, that scheduled caste, scheduled tribe children, students who are entitled to their scholarships have been unable to access their scholarship because they've been told that it will only come through your UID number. And to do that, you have to give the mobile phone, which is attached to your UID number. So suddenly, it's no longer just one number, it's multiple numbers. So you have to give that number. Now, many of them don't possess phones. I don't out of choice. Maybe I could afford one, but I just think it's a bad idea and I don't do it. But there are many people who just can't afford it. You have to keep paying things, right, when you have a mobile phone. So they don't have mobile phones. And so when they got enrolled, they were told you have to put a number. They've put in some chacha's number, mama's number, some dukandar's number. Now the people have vanished. And two, the numbers have changed. So they find that if they do ask for this, then either they have to go back and find some other number and put that number which will be near them, or the OTP will go somewhere where they'll have no idea whether the scholarship has come or not.
Updating costs 25 rupees, just by the way.
Updating cost 25 rupees.
To collect right.
Right. So this is, this is a system, why, my friends and I, why we are furious is because this project has been promoted saying this is for the poor. That this is giving the poor an identity. As you saw, what they've been told is that you will get all your entitlements and benefits and whatever. You just have to get this number and you'll get everything. This has actually become a system by which exclusion is systematically being practiced. So this is one. The second part is just about iSpert and India Stack. See, there is another element to this which I think all of us need to investigate. We need to look at this a little more carefully. To my mind, and all the evidence on the table makes it appear like this is not a government project, or this is not a state project, but that it is actually a privatized project. It's not just a corporate project, but it's more a privatized project. And I think this is more than a hypothesis, but I would, I think all of us need to investigate it before we arrive at any kind of ultimate conclusion. In my mind, it seems pretty plain for these reasons. First thing is the name Aadhaar. Where did it come from? Aadhaar came from a public competition. In the public competition, they got the logo and they got the name. The only strange thing about that name is that Mr. Nilekani's private trust was called Aadhaar Trust, and that trust is what was funding the BATF work in Bangalore. It may be a coincidence. I'm willing to give some whatever for that. I don't know. I'm just saying that it makes me ask questions, that's all. Then you have Mr. Nilekani in the UIDAI. Initially, if you look at the Tag Up Committee report and you look at what has happened with GSTN, you'll find that the intention was that the UIDAI would become a private company. That is, it will reach steady state, after which it will become a private company. GSTN is a private company today. Goods and Services Tax Network, not the GST itself, not the tax, but the network, is a private company. And Mr. Nilekani has been talking in multiple places saying how he helped create this system where 5 billion vouchers will be generated every month, and that algorithms will be created to figure out who is in distress where and whether it's up or down their business, and everything can be seen from this distance, and you'll create products. And so basically all these are data points that are being created so that data point can convert itself into products and services that companies will then use. So UIDAI was intended to be that. But because of the intervention of a large number of people, it did not happen. So then the law was attempted, and then it was dropped, and then a fraudulent constitutional fraud was committed by passing it as a money bill, which is now in challenge before the Supreme Court last year. And this is one, so while this was happening in 2013, they set up this iSpert. What is iSpert? India Software Products Industry Roundtable. So this is iSpert. Who is the mentor of iSpert? Mr. Nilekani. And if you read his book, and the book too, his second book, don't read his book, it's really not, it was very painful to read it, but some of us who work on it have to read it, so we read it. But you'll find that there are things, for instance, it says that 100 people, it's enough to have 100 people in India who will solve all of India's problems. You look at the iSpert, website, and you do a calculation. Don't just count every face, because some of them are repeated multiple times in different places. It's about 100 and some. So all our problems are going to be solved through this process. Now, within this iSpert, there is a document in iSpert which on the website that you might want to read. It's a blog, and it says what kind of ambitions they have for it, how they see it. It's called India in the 2030s. Just take a look at it. It's as Orwellian as it can get. In fact, when I met Mr. Sharat Sharma, I told him, I said, why do you have this on your blog? It's not good advertisement for you, because it seems like you're advocating Orwell. And he says, no, it's just a blog. I said, you are hosting it. And he said, yeah. So they are fine with it. They have no problem with that vision. So I think we need to know what that vision is. And then the iSpert also hosts the people who are working on this India stack. So they are stacking up layer after layer, which will help in create. So the whole idea is that this too is an imagination where you have startup and outsource. So this is the grand imagination. I mean, Infosys did it very well. It made some people very rich. It, produced a certain kind of visibility for India. That's all fine. But can you start up and outsource everything is the question. Now, in India Stack, they've created a series of things. One open API, they say, which from all accounts is not all that open, but whatever it's. And then it can be used by multiple people. So you have e-sign, you have e-KYC, you have digital locker, and a whole host of other things that they are creating within that. Now, who are these people who are creating it within iSpert? There are two people. The main people in this are two, with a few others working with them. These two people are actually decent fellows, so I have no complaints about them. But it's just to know what the system is doing. These two people used to work with the UIDAI, and then they stepped down when Mr. Nilekani stepped down. Mr. Nilekani is now honorary consultant with NPCI. He's also, of course, on the Chandrababu Naidu committee. So he does this work. Now, one of the persons who stepped down is also honorary consultant with NPCI on how UID should be adopted by NPCI. So, which is what Anupam has been talking about. What happens when you lose your bank account and that becomes irrelevant, and it's money moving from UID number to UID number? What kind of things are possible with it? And they're not even looking at, they're just creating these, like, it's very exciting. It's like playing, I don't know, whatever games you play, which make it very exciting. So it's a game. To that extent, it's okay. The problem is that it affects systems. And both of them, when they stepped down, so they were asked in one of these interviews, one of the things that they said was, working on all this within the UIDAI proved to be a problem, because then we are subject to RTI and CAG and all that. So you step out, you can do what you want. And all of them work as volunteers in iSpert. So the natural question is that these are all techies who can earn as much as they want. So what are they doing for a living? There must be something that they do. So you find that these two people who are building up the India Stack and who are the prime movers and who will be on every YouTube and who say that they create these products and then evangelize them to the state, to various departments, law ministry, finance ministry, PMO, Niti Aayog. So they have to evangelize their products to them. And it's all free, right? So it's voluntary work. And then it is being given for free to the government. So there can be no questions that are raised about a thing like this. Now, these two people, who are they being employed by? Their employment, what gives them wages, is EkStep. They work for an organization called EkStep. The problem with EkStep is, I'm sure it does very good work otherwise, but the problem is that that is a philanthropy. That's a Rohini Nilekani, Nanda Nilekani philanthropy. If you're going to interfere in public policy in this kind of way, and you have access to the Prime Minister, and you have access to Niti Aayog, and you have access to every kind of power system, when you hear when you watch on YouTube video, you'll find that NPCI chairman is, I told Dilip and I told whoever. You can tell whoever you want, but in public, you are answerable. How do we get them to at least explain to us what all these connections are, and is it okay for us to have a whole system? So the pipeline that's being created, through which, so we're constantly being told that monopolies will be created and should be created, and that everything should go through this pipeline which is being created by India Stack. So India Stack has to be the route through which financial inclusion will happen, through which cashless will happen. So just to say briefly, what is it that they did in the cashless arena? They said this will be cashless, paperless, presenceless, with e-sign, e-KYC, and digital locker. And there will be a consent layer on top. It appears that the consent layer is still being developed. In the meantime, they've already pushed for the cashless. And they've got, my understanding is that they would have preferred for it to happen sometime in March. They would have been much readier. But for various considerations of whatever kind, the Prime Minister decided that he wanted to do it on November 8th. So, and start the cashless thing on November 27th. So this, when they say cashless, paperless, and presenceless, now if you go, anybody walking into any of these places, it's not only illiterate people, a lot of people have a problem figuring out what to do with this. So just take a look at the Beam app. They tell you how to get onto the Beam app. And when you look at it, you find that they are just telling you, you press this, and then you press that, and then you go here, and then it'll go to the next thing, and then bingo, you're on the system. But you have no idea what you're supposed to do if something goes wrong. If your money seems to vanish from somewhere to somewhere, who are these people who you need to contact? There is nothing. So it's basically getting you onto systems. That's all they are doing. They get you onto the UID system. If you ask what is the use of UID for you, it's hard to tell. All we know is if I don't have it, I won't get anything. But if I have it, do I get anything? Because I have it, there are no questions on this. So there is a whole structure that has been created around this. I think this India Stack and iSpert needs investigation and needs public answers. These are matters of public accountability, and they are not happening despite not just intervening in matters of public policy, but looking, if you look at what they are saying, they're saying that, and this is, Mr. Nilekani is everywhere. That's also why I asked this question. It's almost like there's no other spokesperson for this. So you have a Credit Suisse report, 2016, where the foreword is by Mr. Nilekani, and he says, banks may not survive this because fintech companies are going to come in. Fintech companies are not interested in your assets, which is how credit is given now, but they are interested in every detail about you, and they will use that information to decide whether to give you credit or not. And this money passing from one place to another, you have to give consent to a range of things. So you find that the USAID and Government of India has been drawn into this, and they have together had a pilot. In the pilot, they find two things. One, they say that Indians don't seem to have any understanding of consent. We don't know what we are giving up when we say that, when we say we are consenting to something. So they said that's a kind of dangerous thing. You'll be consenting to all manner of things. For instance, you could well be consenting that money it's like payday loans. When money comes into my account, you can take that money because you've given me credit. Now, any creditor who knows, any fintech companies who knows that there is a certain amount of money that the government is going to put into my account, and that money can go towards paying them even before it feeds me, will be happy to give me credit to the extent that they can recover their money. So their logic, in fact, is that money lenders are very expensive. These guys, microfinance, even they have transaction costs of 22 to 24%. They are being made to, they ask for interest. Whereas this will be so cheap because it's digital and we can see you, we know you. There is an article that appeared in November in the Seminar magazine. Please take a look at it to see what that imagination is. It's connected with the Internet of Things, but how are bankers and people who are dealing with our money talking about it? So you have the Axis Bank retail director telling us that banking will now be in our midst everywhere, but in a non-intrusive manner. And how will it be? He says you'll have your Fitbit, which you will wear, and that will be part of the information that you're willing to give to the bank for you to get your credit. And when they see that Fitbit, they will know how much you sleep, when you sleep, these are not my words. He says this. He says when you sleep, when you wake up, how many calories do you eat, what kind of exercise do you have. And for all this information, they will do us the grand service of giving us cheaper insurances. I mean, there is something that's happening in all of this which is really bizarre. There is a person, Max Goodman, who's done a book called Future Crimes. And he was a cop who then moved out, because he worked on the cybercrime area, and then he moved out, and then he's set up an institute, and so he's written this book of all the crimes that he's seen committed through the digital thing. We don't even know the surface. He says even on the web, we are just scraping the surface. We don't even know what lies beneath it. And the kind of crimes, it's not just fraudulent identities. The kinds of things that are happening there. So please read it. It's important to remember that nobody in public policy seems to have read this. I'll just stop with saying one more thing, that there are people who earlier on when we were raising these questions, and I must say that when we raised the questions in 2010, they were still hypothetical. We were only asking to say, have you considered these things? We were not saying stop it because this is what is going to happen. We were saying that this is likely to happen. This is how we see it. Can you please address it and tell us how you viewed it? And answers were never given. Now, at that time, there were people who said that no. too often have I heard this, that Mr. Nilekani is a good man, he's an intelligent man, he knows what he's doing. I don't question it. He perhaps knows what he's doing. He's certainly an intelligent man. But maybe he's not good, what he's saying is not great for our polity. It may not be very good for us. And anyway, answerability is a necessary part of this kind of public functioning. So you had some institutions which also supported it. So recently you would have seen last month, there was an article by Pratap Bhanu Mehta of the Center for Policy Research. He writes a column in the Indian Express. And he had given his support to the project fully till very recently. And he actually, in 2012, when he was writing about how this is great for opening a bank account and for doing this, that, and the other, had said that all this business about Orwell and surveillance and all that it's just hyperbole. One doesn't really need to worry about it. On 8th February, he wrote a piece in the Indian Express where he has expressly admitted, he says there are three kinds of people who were involved on the UID. One were the skeptics who felt that it will not work. And then there were the zealots who said it will solve everything. And then there were the moderates. And he says he counted himself among the moderates. But he now says that maybe he should have listened to the skeptics a little more carefully, because it seems like everything that the skeptics were saying would happen is coming true. The set of notifications that have come, I really request you to read it, because that tells us, see, there are two kinds of ambitions. If you look at the law, you'll find that the law has a certain kind of thing. It's important to remember that these guys are not just violating Supreme Court orders. They're even violating the law that they themselves made through that process, whatever that process was as a money bill in March last year. That law nowhere allows for the number to be put in different databases. It allows for only two things. One, you can have authentication, which means you give the number and you give the name. It will authenticate yes or no, and you just take the authentication as the user. You can't take the number and the biometric. You can't retain any of that with you. The second thing that it does is that it allows for eKYC, which means you give your number and your biometric or whatever, and instead of your filling up all these forms, UIDAI will send whatever data is on its database, and even that's problematic, but that's a different thing. It will send it to that agency. So, if Geo is asking for your biometric and it's saying that it's getting eKYC from there, it can get, but they cannot attach it to that number. That's not permitted. Nowhere does it allow for seeding. Now what we find is that it's no longer about user agencies. Anybody can ask for it. So you breathe, then they'll say, okay, you're breathing, so you give me your UID number. So this idea that this number has to be ubiquitous and everywhere, this is one big agenda that has been taught to the government, where they are saying this is one way by which we can make people transparent to us. No democracy can survive if people are going to be so transparent to a state. And the second thing that's been happening is Section 57 of the Aadhaar Act, where private companies now can use this database. So how are they using this database? They say, we want, it's for labor. But it's not just for labor. They can verify anybody. They don't have any purpose of their own. Their job is as authenticating agencies and as profiling agencies. They are promoting themselves, saying they will create profiles of people. This is the job that they've given themselves using the UID database. So how do they do it? You give a name or a name and a number. They will send it to the UIDAI. It will say whether it matches or not. So you don't need to be present. Somebody can take your UID number, and this is being done, for instance, by landlords when they want to rent before they rent a house. They say, give me your UID number or I'm not giving the house on rent to you. Anybody and everybody thinks they have a right to your UID number today. And then they go to all the public databases with your number, because once they verified that you are you and that's your number, then they go to all the public. Now there are multiple public databases where you exist. And you don't even know where you are. And nobody is obliged to tell you where you are. So you find that in Kerala, you had the PDS database where they put the whole thing up. What does it have? Your mobile phone number, your bank account number, your UID number, your family, how many people there are in your family, the ages of every one of them, address, name, everything. It was put up. You may have read about this, but so a person, an Indian who's based in Tokyo, he kept writing to the NIC, because NIC maintains this database. And they said, listen, this is very insecure. Do you have any idea what you're doing? Because with this kind of information, you're setting whole systems on the basis of these three numbers. And then you're making it available to a public at large who can do what they want with it. This is invitation to commit crime. So will you kindly just secure it? And they did nothing. So then he waited for a while, he kept telling them, and then he pulled it down himself. And he says that 30 million or whatever numbers he pulled down, he says that as I was pulling that down, I used one IP address for it. Normally, any system, there will be an alert if more than 2 or 3 sets of information are gathered using one IP address. Here you have millions being taken down and there is no security at all. So today, like it happened in the US where their personnel records got hacked and there was a data breach and all these people are sitting with their biometrics and all the rest of it also on it, and they said, we don't know the multiple, how, in what ways it can be used. There are many ways in which this kind of data can be used. Our systems are now being made on the basis of this information, on the basis of the bank account number, UID number, and your mobile phone number. And that is now up for grabs for anybody to take. So they are violating even their own law, which they brought in by allowing this number to be used in all these ways and to populate databases. This is not just a violation of the Supreme Court order, which of course they have been blithely doing, and they don't seem to care that they are doing this. This is not a question of privacy. So we've actually found that all those concerns we had about national security with all these kinds of companies coming in, with creating a database that anybody can pick on and do what they want with, and you'll constantly find UIDAI saying, our data is very secure. Now, like Anupam said, we have no idea, no means of knowing whether it is secure or not. But we certainly know that it's not just about their database. It is about what the number that they are generating is causing for us. You go put your fingerprint somewhere. In Andhra, I have a person who's working there who says, you really think that every time you give that, they come for their pensions or whatever, every month we are sending it to the CIDR and getting it cleared? No way. It is all on each of those, each of the POSs. So they have found that there are people who are on 7 different POS machines in different villages. Because it's not getting authenticated against the CIDR, it's only getting authenticated there. But what does it also mean? It means that their biometrics are being stored by people who can use it in multiple ways. So it is bizarro world where there are all kinds of, this startup culture can't be you can do it at a certain level. You can't do it where you have a whole nation put at risk. And these ambitions of, digital whatever, digital superpower and whatever are dangerous ambitions when especially as we know, and if you look at cashless, you'll find the number of people who are interested in the developing world going cashless. It's the best way to track and profile populations. It's the best way to do it. It's another form of globalization that is coming in, which is post-globalization. And we are not even seeing what that means. We can't wait till it gets too late. That's the reason that I think some of us keep going from place to place. We read these documents, we see them, and then we try and share them. Because if, sometimes Anupam too asks me, he says, why doesn't the Supreme Court do something about it? And I keep telling him, Supreme Court is not hearing anybody complaining. We are only talking in our midst. They are not hearing the complaints.
We are an echo chamber.
We are an echo chamber. So if we want that there should be concern, and if we want that some of these concerns should be addressed, some of these need investigation. We need to know what it is. We need answers. If that's what we want, then we have to speak. Otherwise, we are just walking into, like sheep into. If you've read Roald Dahl, you know what happens to pigs which go into slaughterhouses. Thank you.
I read a report recently in the Times of India that the Supreme Court is saying now that mobile numbers have to be linked to Aadhaar cards.
I'll just explain that. See, what has happened, one of the things that this Attorney General is very good at doing is in getting the government what it wants. So if you see what happened in October 2015, actually in August 2015 when that first order was passed where they said only for LPG and PDS, the government was furious. Because they said, Jan Dhan Yojana was the pet project, and they said, you've not included that, and you have some PDS and some LPG. There was a lot of angst in the PMO. So they made an application to the court, and in October 2015, you should have been there that day. It was quite a sight to see, because you had TRAI, SEBI, RBI, everybody landing up. And then, one saying that we will stop corruption if you allow us to use this. The other one saying we will stop money laundering if you allow us to do this. And the third one saying we'll stop terrorism. Terrorism, by the way, was this whole TRA, I think. So they said if all cell phones have to be attached to a UID number, and that's the authentication that will be required, verification that will be required, in that case, we'll be able to stop terror. At that point, till then the judges listened, and actually that was a bench that was happy to give the Attorney General what he wanted. But even they balked at this. They said, no, hang on a moment. Are you seriously telling us that it will stop terror? And then everybody laughed, and then that was it. So this application had been made and rejected in October 2015. Now somebody files a petition, one Lokniti, this is a small group of people who earlier had said that, they do things like the earlier petition was saying when unidentified dead bodies, when they are picked up, what do you do with these dead bodies? And so their DNA should be collected and kept and whatnot. So this discussion has happened before on this. Now here they went in saying that terrorists are getting mobile phones, so something needs to be done. So the Attorney General gives a statement to the court. And in that they say, the Attorney General says, that we will now be verifying, within the next year, we'll verify every SIM card against the UID number, so it will all be safe, there is no problem. So you can dispose of this petition. Now the court has no means of judging whether this is good or bad. The way the court functions is, if the government says that this is the policy, they will accept that as the policy unless somebody challenges it. Who is going to challenge it there? Nobody who was in the UID matter was present before that court, and this court had not dealt with the matter before. So what they did was to pick up the statement of the Attorney General, put it into their order, and say the Attorney General says, and then they extract these two paragraphs, and then say, we dispose of the matter on these counts. So they did not consider whether it is a good thing to do. They did not say do this. They said this is how they say they are going to safeguard it, and we are recording it. So it's, by my lights, they should not have done it because they knew the case was pending. Also, it was before the Chief Justice, and the Chief Justice had already been approached in January saying, listen, these are urgent and important matters and they need to be heard. And so he knew that the matters needed to be heard, but to give him the benefit of the doubt, and I think it's a fair benefit in a sense, because they do something like 60 matters a day. So they have no means of keeping track of all these things happening unless someone brings it to their notice. Now, nobody from any of the petitions was present before the court, so he has recorded it. This is not an order of the court. The order of the court that has come since March 2016 is only one, which is 14th September 2016, where from West Bengal there was a case about the UGC and post-metric scholarships and things like that. That they said you cannot ask them to produce this UID, change your form and make it clear that the UID is not necessary on the basis of the earlier orders of the Supreme Court. So there they reiterated that maybe your act has come, but the orders of the Supreme Court are very clear. And what the order says is not just that, it says you can't mandate enrollment. It says you can use it only in 6 schemes, even that voluntarily. And you cannot expand it till the court has finally heard and decided the matter. So it doesn't say till some future date, doesn't say till the law comes in. It very clearly says till the court has heard and decided the matter. That has got reiterated in September 2015. Now 2016. Now the problem here is that it's technical. It's a technical processual problem. If you're not a petitioner before the court in a matter, how do you approach the court and say review that order? What is your locus? So on that technicality, it sits. So we need actually the court to wake up, and so this, to my mind, was a deliberate misleading misrepresentation that was done by the Attorney General, who was present in court and was arguing in the matter in October 2015. So he knew that this had been made as a representation and got rejected, that the expansion of the use of the UIDAI, and we must remember this, that it is not as if they said that you can use it in these 6 and you can use it in other places also voluntarily. The court was clear, you cannot use it in anything other than these 6. So using it for SIM cards is violative of the court order, and it was done because the Attorney General, who knew that there had been an earlier application that had been rejected, chose not to inform the court about that, and chose to make it as if it was just a solution that they had found. So there is answerability that the Attorney General bears in this.
What is the answerability?
The answerability, I actually think it is his when you mislead a court.
No. What is it in practice? Can one go to the court and say he's answerable? Who can go to the court and say he's answerable?
Yeah, that's precisely what I was saying, that because it is between those two parties, it's difficult for any, like you are a petitioner in the court, right? You can't go to the court in another matter. So what you then do, which is what that's why the mention was made saying, please hear the matter because all kinds of things are happening around it. On the 27th, you say 22nd, I've heard it's the 27th, I don't know, whichever. There is a hearing, and at that hearing, what is going to be discussed is whether Section 7 can be stayed. Section 7 of the Aadhaar Act. If that can be stayed, then it can't be used anywhere.
My question was, the Attorney General of India has apparently gone to court and he has made a statement which is very clearly concealing facts from the court. Okay? By not mentioning those facts, that is, in my opinion, concealing facts.
Yeah.
Any ordinary person should then be in a position, and that's the question, I believe there's an answer to it.
Yeah.
How do you actually approach the court to correct this problem?
This is Mr. Subbarao. He's a scientist and an advocate. So,
just let me introduce myself. My name is B.K. Subbarao. I have a PhD from IIT Bombay, a former Indian Navy captain, and practicing advocate of Supreme Court of India. When I signed for this seminar, madam, I was, very impressed with your information about both of you. And basically, I thought you were going to tell us something because it mentions there in that on the site, that you are going to say something about the cases pending before the courts. So I was just looking for hearing that. I think you have covered very well, but I think this point. Now let me answer this question. If it is true that the Attorney General really misled the court, and that happened in the judicial proceedings of the court, there is a section 192 of Indian Penal Code on which actually it is to be treated as an offense against public justice listed in section 193 CRPC, for which the procedure is prescribed in section 340 CRPC. What is the procedure? Whether upon an application, this is the wording there, madam, upon an application or otherwise, means even the court also can take suo motu notice of that. You can file an application. Court has to record one thing, that on merits there is a case, as he is saying that he has misled. It is obvious if it is there recorded. Number two, court has to record it is expedient in the interest of justice. Then court causes, if it is Supreme Court, it directs either the Registrar General or the Judicial Registrar to file a complaint and send it to a magistrate of appropriate jurisdiction. This is the wording, madam. So now I can see that you people have been struggling quite a bit and doing a great service to the public. But I think your attempts need some good, solid legal support. It looks to me like that from what I heard. When you said, how can the Supreme Court, sorry if I am taking...
No, that's something else.
What I'm saying is, because I have a lot of points to mention, but I will be very brief, madam. Certainly, I think organizations who have been struggling and people who are enlightening the public like both of you and some others also I heard earlier. Now, I think you need a solid support on the legal side. Now, let me mention, it's not so easy at the Supreme Court, because I have been appearing there and, against all the big stalwarts, Salvi and Rohtage, who is now the present Attorney General of India, all kinds of people, including Chidambaram. After he stepped down, he appeared against me on some matter. And of course, they could not succeed, not because they are less intelligent, madam, they don't come prepared. They think their face value counts. When somebody like you, one of you, appears, with the solid facts and all that, they cannot face you. That's besides the point. Now, we have to do something about Neelakani. Is there anywhere you have made, anybody has made him a respondent? Why I'm saying this, for a reason for that. If you make him a respondent and make him file an affidavit, compel him to file an affidavit, then as both of you have explained very nicely, that when the United States is facing the problem, when the UK is going to scrap it, in 2009, as Dr. Saraph has mentioned, how come he goes and convinces the political leaders of this country that we should go in for that? And then all the media, of course, they keep on saying, we are advancing digital India, we are progressing this and that, all kinds of things goes on, things go on. But I think there's a need for us to make Nilekani as respondent one of the petitions.
Okay.
Now, we want to file a petition saying that he has misled not only the political leaders, but the nation. The problem here is the following, madam. When I said there's a problem, the Supreme Court, let me mention to knowledge of both of you and also everybody here. See, it's not very easy to argue before the Supreme Court judges. What they say is, oh, this is too technical, we are not professional people, we don't know this. This is how they try to get over. It happened in the case of nuclear matters. When the Madras High Court appeal was filed there, of course, a lot of activists came to me after that saying, my PhD in nuclear technology, madam, I write a lot of articles, and Hindu carried a lot of articles, my articles and all that. What happened, whoever has appeared, they are not presenting properly, madam. That nuclear thing, if you read the judgment, it's a wrong judgment. I wrote an article and it was published. And I precisely pointed out where are the errors. There is no reply. Somebody said, sir, you may get a contempt notice from Supreme Court. Yes, let them give that contempt notice. That will be good for us. So all I'm saying, madam, there is a need for us to proceed in a combined way, and I think I should congratulate Moneylife and the madam who has taken a lot of trouble in bringing awareness in not only one field, there are so many other fields that she has been bringing awareness to the public through her efforts. So just to sum up, what I want to say, madam, crime is correct, what both of you have nicely explained. Then court, attorney general, misreading, if that is, because I have not gone through the facts. I accept. So you have got the documents. Yeah. Then chief justice, somebody, somewhere, you saying that, how can we go intervene? Actually, in civil matters, madam, you can. It's not. It's only criminal matters you are not allowed. In civil matters, you can always go and intervene. It's not that you have to be petitioner.
Okay, we'll discuss that, but it's a disposed of matter. So lawyers have been trying to see.
That we will discuss separately. All I'm saying, madam, concerted effort is required using the knowledge of people like you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Subbarao. I'm sure they would appreciate the help.
I have a question. My name is John Menezes. Indian Railways have issued an order that from the 1st of April, anyone buying a ticket online and claiming a senior citizen concession must register his or her Aadhaar number with Indian Railways. Is this legitimate or not?
It's illegal. But I have to say this, that the reason, that there were two other parts of this conversation, which were, one of it was on biometrics and the other on the court orders. It's just that it's very difficult to put it all, and I just picked up from where Anupam left off, so these two have got left out. The one fact, there are some things that we can just say as, kind of chapeaus, like capping all these discussions. One, like I said, was coercion, and the other is illegality. It's rampant illegality by the state, and this is something I think we've talked so many times, which is why I didn't say it again this time. Rampant illegality at every stage, to the extent that actually, going back to Nilekani's book for a minute, he says in that we never wanted it to be mandatory, but this government made it mandatory, and then, the Supreme Court had to intervene to say that it should not be mandatory. That, you can call it an untruth, and if you're a little blunter, you can call it a lie. Because the UIDAI, the moment in September 2013, when the Supreme Court passed an order saying you cannot make it mandatory, they filed an 50-odd page affidavit in the court application saying, please allow us to make it mandatory. Because that's the only way this country is going to be saved, by having all of this made mandatory. So it's not like they sat back, they were upset that the court passed this order. So from then on, from September 2013, when the court first passed the order, there have been a total of 6 orders in those matters, including the CBI matter in this, and a further order which came in September 2016. They have just been violating the orders left, right, and center. There are a number of contempt applications that are pending before the court, and by pushing it off to a constitution bench, they have made sure that the matter is not heard, and they are carrying on with whatever they are doing. So as I see it, there are 2 things that need to happen in this case. First, 3 things in fact. First, it has to come up for hearing. Secondly, there has to be a hearing on contempt and punishment for contempt, because this is not just about some order being violated. It is about putting a whole nation at, and a population at risk. They have no business doing it without answering basic questions. The reason that the court said that you must not have it in expanded applications is because of questions of surveillance, because of questions about all these companies that are involved, which have all kinds of dubious antecedents. It's because of things like profiling, which puts different classes of population at risk. It's because of the kind of insecurity they're just creating such databases. See, and we must remember that UIDAI has not just created one database. It has assisted in the creation of multiple such databases, which makes us vulnerable every time you have one more database like this being created. And none of them, like we saw with the Kerala PDS, none of them even has any idea about security. We are, we're imperiling that population, and nobody has any business doing it. So this was not just about mandatory, voluntary, it was about the whole project being hugely problematic. And that's why they said limit it, so that even if you're using it, you use it only in some of these problems of tracking and profiling and all of that will not happen, and don't force people to enroll. They have violated every order. Why are they able to get away with it? Because we are not raising our voices. We are all upset by it. In fact, I've been asking, why is there that there are no collectives that speak? Why is it that, I'm a senior citizen myself in this context. Why is it that, 20 of us, 30 of us can't just write an open letter? Why is it that we sit and take it when they do it to us? And, somebody gave me an answer to that, which kind of chilled me to the bone, because they were saying when the Bengal famine happened, the British administrators were expecting a riot. No riot happened. People just walked out onto the streets and died. When demonetization happened, the Supreme Court said, what are you doing, government? There are going to be riots. People did not just not riot. We all stood quietly in queues and died if we could not survive it. Now, so long as we are docile like this and obedient, we can't expect that there is anybody in authority who's going to care about what we have, whether we say. Do we accept that version of anti-national? In fact, I think this whole project is anti-national.
But look at how big the problem is. It stands on such weak foundation. It's bound to collapse now or the other. It's just a question of time. And when it's going to collapse, there's going to be such a big about it that they will have to scrap it. There's no choice.
Can I just say this? For many people, it has already collapsed.
Yeah, but it's not there in public domain yet. But it's so weak, because I've been aware of what is happening so far. Its foundation is so weak that it cannot survive. It has to collapse. And it's a question of a few more scams that need to happen, and people will know what's going to happen. The Supreme Court will step in and say, enough is enough. Let's put an end to this nonsense.
Sachin, you need to help. He's also a lawyer, a lot of experience. I think lots of lawyers.
We are going to.
You need to help take this fight forward.
Of course. My details are there. Anything, anytime, any help. I look at it more philosophically, because this burning yourself, going and screaming at the top of your voice from rooftops. People are immune today. They are not bothered about what's happening. They are saying, I need my roti kapda makan. They are not bothered.
Can I say that's not true? Because
I agree with
the
you.
screaming, people are bothered.
They are.
There is a certain...
Is the Supreme Court willing to listen to you? That's the last stop.
But this is what I'm saying. If they don't hear, how do they even know that we are bothered by this?
The amount of litigation pending before Supreme Court and the way the Attorney General manages the Supreme Court, it's impossible for you and me to be heard. So what do? Wait for it to collapse by itself?
No, I think it's not that. I think we're abdicating too soon.
Well, I believe in that, Suchita, because it's come to such a stage. We are all in a minority here. What can we do? I mean, we can shout. I sympathize with it. I want to shout.
Isn't that right?
People can do a lot. Join us.
I would tell one thing. Okay, some hints. There's something called IoT. I almost have heard about IoT, Internet of Things. This is going to be the big eye of the government on you. You talk about Fitbit, that is nothing compared to that. Okay, and there is something known as, other than Aadhaar card, there's a National Population Register. Have you heard of this? This is being done in Goa. I know they all start at small places.
No, it started everywhere. So there's a whole, the story of the, maybe next time we should do national
It's simple
population.
story, it is an ego clash between two people.
No. It is not an ego clash between two people. It's far more than that, and it was a far more serious issue. The way in which it got dealt with, especially in January 2012, is a very telling statement. In fact, Mr. Chidambaram, I think, should now speak out about what happened between the 5th of January and the 27th of January 2012. He started on the 5th of January with saying that, the way you've collected all this data, it is insecure, it's rubbish, so I don't accept it for my population register. By the 25th or 27th, when they had the press conference of January 2012, they were sitting, they kissed and made up, and they said, let's share the country half and half. Now, we need to know what happened in that time, that suddenly this insecure process of collecting data and that insecure database became so secure that the Home Ministry was willing to adopt it, and not just adopt it, but share the country 50-50 with this agency. I think there are a lot of people who have answers to give.
And you also want to know what happened in those 15 minutes when Nilekani met Narendra Modi and he did a 180-degree turn on Aadhaar.
Well, actually, the debate I'm really quite enjoying, in the sense that our blood has been boiling for the last several years, and of course now, after hearing both of you and listening to all the people, I think I also welcome two ideas here. One, that we have to investigate the formation and the motivation of organizations like Esprit. And working in the free software movement, we have also felt at one point that one of the biggest hurdle for promoting free and open source software in this country was NASSCOM. And there is a link to the way how NASSCOM was promoting the business for Microsoft and Adobe and various other organizations in this country. And today, the same group of people creating Esprit for, Digital India and being on the front, I think also needs to be investigated. And there's a serious, for a lack of a better term, mafia doing the job here.
We say cabal usually.
Well,
That's a different language.
It's a different language. And so anyway, so that's the welcoming.
Very quickly, because there are people who want questions there.
Two short questions and one comment. I don't know, is it possible to have two UIDs?
Yes.
That's all right. Is it possible to transfer one of those to me who doesn't have one? No. Okay. One comment and one comment. It
can be misused. Yes, you can actually use somebody else's UID too.
Yeah.
That's what he's asking. That's okay.
When people are mentioning about the various problems happening or possible like this, would one of the solutions be to hack Nandan Nilekani's UID and use it for immediately the whole problem would be solved?
He himself has no UID.
Yeah. See, we have been a part of this campaign. Usha, Anupam, and everybody has been joining us. You said, okay, let the system collapse. I think not, and we are making noise. My only suggestion for our strategy campaign to invigorate it more is like what Anupam said about the contempt notices. The contempt notice, I think we should all give contempt notice, and they should be somewhere placed together. And I want to tell people through media a lot about it. And although we have paid media and we have people having Nandan Nilekani's interview and all, but I think now many online platforms, I think, which have really, enlightened people on this. And so we need to emphasize more on this No Aadhaar campaign and more voices.
I must say one thing about that interview, though. The interviewer was very interestingly good. She was good. So it wasn't like, please tell us it wasn't that kind of an interview. It was an intelligent interview. from her side.
Ma'am, after listening to an interesting conversation, I just want to know that is there any provision in the law wherein somebody who wants to opt out of the Aadhaar card, can he opt out? Is there any law which does not, deter him?
From the beginning, they were very clear that you can opt in. You can opt in, you cannot opt out. So the first major move that has come from Meghalaya, from people in Meghalaya who put out, who sent notices to the government and to the UIDAI and to their government, saying that now that they are aware of the kind of things that are concerned in this UID thing, they want to opt out. And I think it will be very useful because they've kind of led us on this. So I think it will be very useful for everyone to adopt what Meghalaya is saying, and not create a hegemony by saying it has to be from Delhi or Bombay or Madras or whatever, because they are the leaders in thought on that, on how to act on this. So that is available on a public website, their appeal.
Suggestion here, can we actually have a similar article with a format of people who want to opt out sign up?
Sure.
Actually, I think there's another case here.
But just one thing, if I can say, the opting out is only about the UIDAI database. There is nothing in the law that says that you can't opt out of all these other multiple places where you're putting your number. The government may not let you do it, but there is nothing in the law which stops you from asking them to do it and then insisting.
Because I just want to add one more information. Probably some of us might have seen it. I had seen this on the YouTube sometime back, that there was a Russian hacker who had cloned the fingerprints of the Russian defense minister. German. And he had printed it just by doing a handshake, I think something like that. And
from distance.
Hands like this on the
dais. So I think this is not very far in India.
And he's also done it of her iris from a high-resolution photograph. Angela Merkel.
Now it's easier to do it even from an iPhone. No. Just taking a photograph.
My question was, when there are people who go to actually enroll in UIDAI and then are rejected because of a mismatch or a match apparently with an existing record, then clearly they have a right at this point to opt out of that record. But that was the question I'm going to ask, which was further to the question he asked, okay, how do you opt out? How do you opt out when you're not even registered?
There's one little thing on this opt-out, opt-in and this. See, we know that, for instance, when this is by their own admission, that when 80 crore people had been enrolled, 80 crore numbers had been issued, 8 crore enrollments were rejected. We know that. We have also asked them to find out what the reason for the rejection was, and they do not have a feedback system. So they do not know why. They say it must have been duplicates, must have been something else. So they have no idea. So plainly, even when they say that allow us to experiment, which is what expert people tell us all the time, allow us to experiment, they are not even experimenting, because to experiment you need to have results, you need to know why this is happening. There's nothing. So that's one. But the question that raises is what Anupam was also saying, that okay, we know that 8 crore have been rejected. We know some of them who were wrongly rejected. So we know that it's not a good system. But we have no means of knowing how many people were registered who ought not to have been registered. We don't know how many were duplicates. For instance, in one of the places, the villagers were saying that, "Nahi, madam, because they have this problem that you have to be there to collect your rations." Now they cooked up a thing in their own heads because they had heard this, and when they go for registration now, like I will put 3 fingers and my sister will put these 2. So between the 2 of us, we can go and one of us will be able to... this is Indian Jugaad, yeah. So, you have no idea what the database is about. And actually the story on biometrics is about that. And there is a whole story on that, but it's simply too long and complicated to say it now. But we can do it another time. It's a fascinating story.
Why is the UIDAI wanting to make standards for biometric? They're not the sole keepers of biometric standards in India, right? Or in the world,
Okay, I'm sure Anupam has his explanation for this. So the explanation that I was offered was that every time there is this authentication system that happens, it's not as if it just, you put here and it goes there. There is an authorized user agency, there's an authorized service agency, and then it goes through multiple kinds of things. Now, this pipeline through which it goes is controlled by the India Stack people. And they don't want to lose control over this data. This will give them multiple data points that they want to control. It's about creating a monopoly in another way. This is what we've been told as an explanation. somebody who is in the know of things will have to tell us whether this explanation is right or wrong, but it seems highly plausible. When you consider the extraordinary interest and the complete control that the India Stack people have over any kind of development, it's, sometimes I think, are there only 3 people in this, Mr. Nilekani, of course, often says, they are the guys who do the work, I only talk, and I think he's right. So those who do that work are just 2. Or 3 or 5 or 7. In a world where we are saying that all the techies, the smart guys are in this country, is nothing else emerging from anywhere else? Why is this India Stack controlling all of this in this way, and what does it mean? It has some meaning. And this explanation that it's about controlling the pipeline, because they couldn't control the UIDAI itself, the next best is to control the pipeline to the UIDAI. So it seems plausible, but I would be very happy to know how else to think about it.
Well, the other explanation...
He's wearing
Yeah, so the other explanation is that the UIDAI will say that we need to have registered biometric devices so that we can actually detect where this biometric came from, especially in case of stored biometrics. And that is why they want to create these devices. So that's their explanation. Of course, there are many ways to bypass, despite the fact that you can have a registered device. But that's the simpler explanation from UIDAI.
सब लोग बोलते हैं कि we should wait for the system to crash. I think we should put persons to let this system crash earlier.
Okay, thank you very much for a very wonderful and enlightening discussion today. So thank you very much. Let's give them a big hand.